In the winter of 1847, a baby girl was born with 6 fingers on each hand and eyes that never opened properly. Her name was Mercy Caldwell, and she came into the world in a cabin where 17 wooden steps led down to a root cellar that reeked of iron and old blood. The Caldwell family had settled in Thornwick Hollow, deep in the Kentucky mountains, where morning fog created a natural veil around their property. Ezekiel Caldwell built the main house with his own hands, using oak beams that measured exactly 7 inches thick. His wife, Tabitha, brought with her a leather-bound ledger that contained 3 generations of family names, all written in the same careful script. Tell us in the comments your city and the exact time on your clock right now. How many children were born in that house who should never have existed? The first signs appeared in the parish records kept by Father McKinnon. Birth dates didn't match the midwife's accounts. Godparents carried the same surnames as the parents. One entry listed Ezekiel as both father and grandfather to the same child. Tabitha Caldwell measured 4 feet 11 inches tall and weighed no more than 90 pounds. But her voice carried through every room of that house. She kept her hair in a single braid that reached exactly 7 inches past her waist. The braid smelled of lavender soap and something else, something metallic, that lingered in the air long after she passed. The property stretched across 200 acres of dense pine and hickory. Ezekiel built a chapel with 13 pews, all carved from the same fallen oak. The altar held a brass cross that measured 3 inches high and bore an inscription in Latin that no one in the family could read. By the second winter, 3 more children had been born. Each carried the mark: extra fingers, clouded eyes, or skin that bruised at the slightest touch. The family midwife, Ezekiel's own sister, Constance, kept detailed notes in a separate ledger bound in red leather. The cabin's main room contained a fireplace built from stones that Ezekiel had hauled from a creek bed 3 miles away. Above the mantel hung a daguerreotype of Tabitha's parents, their faces stern and unsmiling. The frame measured exactly 4 inches by 6 inches and bore a crack that ran diagonally from corner to corner. Mercy grew slowly. At age 3, she could barely walk the 17 steps from the main house to the chapel. Her fingers, all 12 of them, moved in ways that unsettled even her own family. She spoke in whispers and spent hours staring at the crack in her great-grandparents' photograph. The first outside visitor came in the spring of 1851. Dr. Samuel Hartwell rode up from Pineville to deliver supplies and check on the family's health. He found Mercy sitting in the root cellar, counting stones in the dim light. The air down there smelled of lavender soap and something metallic. Hartwell's medical bag contained instruments that gleamed in the lamplight. He examined 5 children that day and recorded his findings in careful script. Each child showed signs of what he called concentrated hereditary characteristics. He left that afternoon and never returned. The leather-bound ledger revealed more than birth records. Tabitha had traced bloodlines back through 7 generations, mapping marriages between cousins, uncles, and nieces. Red ink marked the unions that produced healthy children. Black ink marked the others. Ezekiel's workshop sat behind the main house, connected by a covered walkway that measured exactly 23 feet long. Inside, he crafted coffins from pine wood and lined them with fabric that Tabitha sewed herself. 3 coffins sat completed but unused, sized for children between the ages of 5 and 12. The family's isolation deepened with each passing season. Townspeople stopped visiting after rumors spread about strange sounds coming from the hollow at night. The sounds, witnesses claimed, resembled children singing hymns in voices too old for their years. By 1852, Mercy had grown into a young woman whose appearance unsettled everyone who saw her. Her 12 fingers moved with unusual precision when she worked at her needlepoint. Her eyes, though clouded, seemed to track movement that others couldn't see. The red leather ledger contained a final section written in Tabitha's careful hand. It listed names that had never appeared in any church record or county document. Children born in secret and buried in graves, marked only with wooden crosses that bore no inscriptions. Father McKinnon made his last visit to Thornwick Hollow in the autumn of 1852. He found the family gathered in their chapel, 13 people sitting in 13 pews, all sharing the same pronounced jawline and the same clouded eyes. The brass cross on the altar had been turned upside down. The priest carried a silver communion chalice that measured 3 inches in diameter. When he raised it during the service, every person in the chapel turned to look at Mercy. She sat in the front pew, her 12 fingers folded in her lap, her lips moving in silent prayer. That winter brought news that shook the entire hollow. Mercy was with child, though no young man had been seen near the property in months. Tabitha announced the pregnancy with the same calm voice she used to discuss the weather or the price of flour in town. The child's father remained unnamed until Constance, the family midwife, could no longer keep the secret. She rode to Pineville one morning and told Dr. Hartwell what she had witnessed. The father was Ezekiel himself, Mercy's grandfather, the same man who had built those 17 steps down to the root cellar. Dr. Hartwell returned to Thornwick Hollow with the county sheriff and 2 deputies. They found the main house empty, except for the overturned furniture and 13 burnt candles arranged in a circle on the kitchen table. The air still smelled of lavender soap and something metallic. The only trace left behind was the red leather ledger, abandoned on Ezekiel's workshop table. Its final entry, written in shaking handwriting, read, "The child comes tonight. May God forgive what we have made." Below that, someone had drawn a crude map showing a path from the workshop to the root cellar and beyond into the dense woods. Search parties combed the mountains for weeks, but found nothing except occasional sightings of smoke rising from Deep in the forest. The 17 wooden steps still led down to the root cellar, but now they descended into empty darkness. The brass cross from the chapel had vanished along with the family. Years passed before anyone dared to settle in Thornwick Hollow again. The new owners found remnants, scraps of fabric buried under the floorboards, coins with dates that didn't match any known currency, and 3 wooden coffins that had been broken apart and scattered. The most disturbing discovery came when workers were renovating the root cellar. Behind a false wall, they found a collection of small bones arranged in careful patterns. Each set was accompanied by a scrap of paper bearing a name and a date. The names matched those from the red leather ledger. A local historian named Professor William Marsh spent 6 months researching the Caldwell family in 1874. His notes, preserved in the Pineville Historical Society, describe finding birth records that listed the same people as both parents and grandparents to multiple children. Medical records from the period show an unusual concentration of birth defects in that region. Marsh's final report contained one disturbing detail. According to his calculations, if Mercy's pregnancy had come to term, the child would have been genetically related to her through 5 different family lines. The mathematical probability of survival would have been less than 10%. Local merchants in Pineville began reporting strange encounters throughout 1853. A woman matching Tabitha's description appeared at General Morrison's store purchasing supplies with silver coins that bore no mint marks. She bought 17 candles, 3 bolts of white fabric, and a bottle of laudanum. Morrison noted that her hands shook when she counted the money. The storekeeper's ledger, still preserved in the Pineville Museum, shows purchases made by T. Caldwell, continuing for months after the family's supposed disappearance. Each entry lists the same items: candles, fabric, and medicine. The handwriting grows increasingly erratic with each visit. Samuel Boone, a trapper who worked the ridges above Thornwick Hollow, reported seeing smoke rising from the abandoned property well into 1854. He claimed to have found freshly dug earth near the old chapel and small footprints in the mud around the 17 stone steps that led to an old well behind the main house. The well had been sealed with a wooden cover held down by 7 heavy stones. Boone lifted the cover and found water that reflected an oily sheen in the lamplight. Floating on the surface were scraps of the same white fabric that Tabitha had been purchasing in town. The air rising from the well smelled of lavender soap and something metallic. Dr. Hartwell's private journals, discovered in 1922, contained detailed sketches of the Caldwell children's deformities. One drawing showed a child's skull, with measurements indicating severe cranial compression. Another depicted a hand with 7 fingers, each joint twisted at an unnatural angle. His notes mention hereditary degradation progressing at an alarming rate. The most disturbing entry in Hartwell's journal described his final examination of Mercy in 1852. He wrote that her pregnancy showed signs of multiple genetic anomalies incompatible with viable birth. He estimated the child would survive no more than 72 hours if born alive. Constance Caldwell, the family midwife, vanished 3 days before the sheriff's visit to Thornwick Hollow. Her cabin, located 2 miles down the mountain, contained evidence of a hasty departure. Neighbors found bloody rags hidden under her floorboards and a collection of glass vials filled with dark liquid that smelled of herbs and copper. The vials were labeled in Constance's careful handwriting with dates spanning 5 years. Each bore a child's name from the red leather ledger. The contents, when later analyzed by a chemist in Louisville, contained traces of mercury, lead, and several plant compounds known to cause birth defects. A traveling preacher named Reverend Joshua Mills encountered the Caldwell family during their final winter in the hollow. He described a scene that haunted him for the rest of his life. The family gathered each evening in their chapel, where Mercy sat at the front, holding her swollen belly, while the others sang hymns in voices that seemed to echo from deep underground. Mills noted that the brass cross on the altar had been positioned exactly 3 inches to the left of center. 13 white candles surrounded it, each burned down to precisely the same height. The Reverend fled that night and never spoke publicly about what he witnessed until his deathbed confession in 1891. County records from 1853 show that the Thornwick Hollow property was sold at auction for unpaid taxes. The winning bidder, a land speculator named Harrison Webb, visited the site once before abandoning his claim. Webb told associates that the house contained rooms that didn't appear on any architectural plans and stairs that led to spaces that shouldn't exist. Webb's surveyor found discrepancies between the property boundaries and the physical structures. The main house measured 17 feet longer than the original building permits indicated. The root cellar extended 43 feet beyond what the foundation should have supported. Most disturbing, They discovered a second cellar beneath the first, accessible only through a narrow passage behind the stone fireplace. The lower cellar contained artifacts that predated the Caldwell family's arrival. Pottery shards bore markings similar to Cherokee symbols, suggesting the land had been used for burial rituals long before European settlement. Mixed among the pottery were more recent items: children's clothing, wooden toys, and 13 small leather shoes arranged in a perfect circle. Martha Whitfield, who worked as a seamstress in Pineville, claimed to have sewn clothing for the Caldwell family throughout their time in the Hollow. Her receipt book showed orders for increasingly smaller garments, infant gowns that grew progressively tinier with each order. The final entry, dated 3 days before the family's disappearance, was for a burial shroud sized for a newborn. The seamstress preserved samples of the fabric she used for the Caldwell orders. Modern textile analysis conducted in 1978 revealed that the thread contained traces of human hair woven into the cotton fibers. DNA testing was impossible with the available technology, but microscopic examination showed the hair came from at least 7 different sources. Benjamin Tucker, the county's tax assessor, visited Thornwick Hollow in the spring of 1853 to evaluate the property. He found the main house in perfect condition, but noted strange modifications. Windows had been bricked over from the inside. Doors had been reinforced with iron bars. The 17 steps leading to the root cellar showed unusual wear patterns, as if heavy objects had been dragged up and down repeatedly. Tucker's assessment report mentioned a peculiar architectural feature: a room on the second floor that could only be entered through a window. Inside, he found walls covered with detailed family trees, drawn in what appeared to be dried blood. The diagrams showed interconnected bloodlines spanning 4 generations, with red circles marking children who had died in infancy. The final piece of physical evidence came from an unexpected source. Railroad workers laying track near Thornwick Hollow in 1879 discovered a cache of personal items buried beneath a dead oak tree. The collection included Tabitha's silver wedding ring, Ezekiel's pocket watch, and 13 small graves marked with wooden crosses that bore only initials and dates. The pocket watch had stopped at exactly 11:43, though whether morning or evening remained unclear. Inside the watch case, someone had scratched the words, "Mercy's time comes," in letters so small they were barely visible to the naked eye. The watch crystal was cracked, in a pattern that formed 7 distinct lines, radiating from the center. Among the buried items was a final letter, written in Mercy's own hand and addressed to no one in particular. The letter, now housed in the Kentucky Historical Society archives, contains her account of the family's final months. She wrote of dreams where dead children called to her from beneath the floorboards, and of feeling movement in her womb that seemed to respond to the phases of the moon. Mercy's letter described the night her child was born. According to her account, the labor began during a thunderstorm that lasted exactly 13 hours. The baby emerged with features that resembled 3 different family members simultaneously. It lived for 70 hours before its breathing stopped, just as Dr. Hartwell had predicted. The child was buried in the lower cellar, beneath stones arranged in the same pattern as the pottery shards. Mercy wrote that she could hear its crying for weeks afterward, echoing through the walls of the house. The family decided to leave Thornwick Hollow the night the crying finally stopped. Archaeological surveys conducted in 2003 found evidence supporting many details from Mercy's letter. Ground-penetrating radar detected anomalies consistent with multiple burial sites scattered across the property. Soil samples revealed elevated levels of lead and mercury, matching the contents of Constance's medicine vials. The most recent discovery occurred in 2017, when a hiking trail was being constructed through the former Caldwell property. Work crews uncovered the remains of a stone foundation that matched no known building on the original survey maps. Beneath the foundation lay a collection of bones that forensic analysis dated to the mid-1800s. The bones showed signs of severe developmental abnormalities, consistent with extreme inbreeding. Several skulls displayed cranial features that occurred in less than 1% of the general population. DNA analysis revealed genetic markers indicating the remains belonged to individuals who shared ancestry through multiple family lines. The brass cross from the Caldwell Chapel surfaced in 1889 at a pawn shop in Lexington. The owner claimed it had been sold to him by a woman with 12 fingers who spoke in whispers and paid in coins that looked older than they should have been. When authorities investigated, they found the coins bore dates from 1847, the year the Caldwell family first settled in Thornwick Hollow. Modern genealogical research has traced the Caldwell name through Kentucky records, but the trail goes cold after 1853. No descendants bearing that surname appear in any subsequent census data or birth records. It's as if the entire family simply vanished from history, leaving behind only scattered artifacts and disturbing stories passed down through generations. To this day, no one knows if the story of the Caldwell family really happened, or if it's merely an Appalachian legend passed down through generations of mountain storytellers. The truth may be buried with them in unmarked graves, somewhere deep in those Kentucky hills. What do you think? Was this a real case or just mountain folklore? Let us know in the comments below, and remember that sometimes the most disturbing stories are the ones we desperately want to believe are just stories. The lesson here reminds us that isolation and secrecy can lead to unimaginable consequences, and that some family traditions should never be preserved at any cost.